Have you ever had that feeling you're showing up every day, you're doing the work, doing it well, laboring faithfully in your career, your calling, whatever it is. But when you look around, it just feels like the spotlight is, well, it's somewhere else entirely. You feel invisible.
Hmm.
And this tension, it's something I think so many professionals feel today. We want those visible results, right? We need the metrics to show progress. But at the same time, we have this gut feeling that the most important growth, the really deep stuff, it happens quietly in the background.
When no one's watching.
And that's exactly what we're getting into.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are peeling back the layers on a paradox that you see in, well, in all great biographies, really, the absolute importance of what is unseen. We've gathered a whole set of sources that examine this foundational idea, sometimes called hidden formation, and we're drawing specifically from some of the earliest accounts of the life of Jesus.
So our mission today is to analyze this principle of the so-called silent years and pull out some actionable wisdom from it, something to help combat this modern obsession we all have with speed and immediate visibility.
It's all about understanding how that private preparation is really the only solid ground for any kind of lasting public influence.
It's such a striking historical narrative when you stop and think about it.
It really is, isn't it? The core curiosity here, and what our sources really force you to grapple with, is this huge disproportion. I mean, Jesus spent about 3 decades, 30 years, in a completely private life.
30 years.
And yet, before his public ministry even starts, that entire formative period it's basically summarized in just 3 brief verses, Luke 2.4 and then 2.52. That's it.
That brevity is, it's pretty jarring.
It is jarring, but it's also completely intentional. It's almost like a flashing warning sign. The sources suggest that if we ignore this period, if we try to jump straight to the public stage without that private prep, we end up building what one source calls brittle success.
Brittle success. I like that.
Yeah, it looks great on the outside, but it has no root system. It can't survive the first storm that comes along.
That's the perfect phrase for it. A shell without any substance.
Yeah.
So if the Gospels decided to just skip the daily details, right? The sermons he didn't preach yet, the miracles he hadn't performed, and instead they compressed 3 decades into just a couple of verses, what is the crucial message there?
The message is that the process of formation is more important than the spectacle of events. Those 2 verses, they give us the 3 essential dimensions of growth that were being cultivated. They tell us that he grew in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and man. And that's the blueprint.
Okay, so let's unpack that trilogy. Wisdom, stature, and favor. I mean, those can sound like very high-level sort of spiritual concepts. But for someone listening right now, maybe prepping for a meeting or managing a team, what do those qualities practically mean in this context of hidden formation?
Right? We have to look at them holistically. They're all interwoven. So let's start with wisdom. This is so much more than just knowledge. It's not about data acquisition. It's about integrating intellect with deep discernment and a kind of moral reverence.
So applying truth skillfully.
Exactly. It's cultivated not in some big classroom, but through consistent study, quiet reflection, and just observing human nature in daily life.
But that's the tension today, isn't it? I mean, information is everything. If you're not the smartest person in the room, you often don't even get a chance. So how do we reconcile this slow, reflective wisdom with the need for speed and competitive intelligence?
Well, that's the key. The sources argue that discernment is the competitive advantage. Anyone can consume data.
Yeah.
But wisdom lets you navigate complexity, especially moral and ethical complexity. It helps you choose a measured, thoughtful response instead of the kind of knee-jerk reaction that social media just thrives on.
So wisdom is knowing when and how to use the knowledge.
Precisely. It's infinitely more valuable than just having the facts. Okay, so next up is stature. Now, this does include physical maturity, of course. Health, the strength to endure labor. But critically, it's also about emotional resilience. It signifies patience, endurance under pressure, and the ability for self-regulation.
So it's not just about hitting the gym, it's about having the emotional stamina to lead a team through a year-long crisis, or having the character to take a hit and just keep going.
Exactly right. Leadership requires stamina, and not just physical energy. It needs a robust, almost unshakable character. And you can see this modeled in other places, like the accounts of David. His years as a shepherd, I mean, they weren't glamorous.
Not at all.
But it was this continuous process of fending off predators, keeping the flock alive, surviving isolation. Those trials forged the resilience and courage he'd need later. So stature is built in those small, consistent acts of discipline.
Okay, so that brings us to the last one, favor.
Yes, favor. This is the relational piece, and it's kind of a dual quality. It's about alignment with God and credibility with people. Favor with God is rooted in things like hidden obedience and prayer. But favor with people, that comes from demonstrated humility, integrity, and consistent service.
That is a key point. In the professional world, we often confuse favor with man, with, networking or being politically savvy. How do we make sure we're cultivating genuine favor that's based on integrity and not just, playing a popularity game?
Well, genuine favor, real credibility, it's processed gradually. You can't rush it. It's earned in those unseen moments. If you're known as the person who does excellent ethical work, whether or not the boss is watching, that builds favor.
Right.
If you try to shortcut it with superficial networking, that favor it's fleeting. It
Yeah.
has to come from a deep internal wellspring of character.
That's so clear. These weren't qualities that just appeared overnight. They were intentionally cultivated day by day.
Which leads us to the next question. Where did this happen? We have to look at the context of Nazareth itself. Yeah, and we tend to glamorize these historical settings, but all the accounts suggest that first century Nazareth was profoundly unremarkable.
Just a small town.
A small, obscure village. Tucked away, no PR machine. It was a place where everyday duties, domestic life, just formed this slow, necessary rhythm. In a way, it was a perfect laboratory for preparation.
And in that lab, you have the vocational training. Jesus worked as a carpenter, a tecton. And that wasn't just a placeholder job until the real work began.
Not at all. That labor wasn't a distraction from the mission. It was the preparation for it. I mean, think about the skills you need for that kind of work. Precision, attention to detail, persistence when a piece of wood splits, practical problem solving.
All qualities you'd need for ministry later on.
Absolutely critical. For teaching complex truths, for dealing with broken people, for solving these intractable relational problems. The sources remind us that the consistency of the hand and the focus of the eye were honed for years before he ever addressed a crowd.
And it wasn't just the work, right? It was also the domestic structure. Luke makes a point to include that detail that Jesus was obedient to them, meaning Mary and Joseph. Why is that small detail so important?
It carries immense weight because it establishes a principle of hierarchy. Obedience in the hidden domestic context, that's what shapes humility and relational prudence before public authorities ever grant it.
I see.
If you can't be faithful in the unseen structure of home and simple work, you're just not prepared to handle the responsibility of public influence.
The parallel for us today is it's just inescapable. When you're stuck doing those routine, mundane tasks, managing spreadsheets, dealing with a difficult family member, answering the 100th email, those aren't distractions from your real purpose. They're necessary sacred training.
That's the reframe.
We have to see them as moments of character shaping, not just frustrating items on a to-do list.
Reframing is everything. And once we understand that, it raises the next big question. If this formation is so important, why does God intentionally delay the public stage? Why the obscurity? Our sources suggest a powerful framework, which we can call the 3 Ps of God's timing.
The 3 Ps. Okay, let's start with the first one.
The first P is protection. Obscurity literally shields potential from premature exposure. Early visibility can invite confrontation or misunderstanding that could jeopardize the whole mission before the foundation is even set.
So resisting that temptation to accelerate, to launch the product early or jump into that leadership role, it's actually a strategic defensive move.
It is.
It ensures that when you do emerge, the opposition that always comes won't derail you because your roots are deep.
Exactly. We see this with Moses, right? He wasn't immediately pulled from the palace to lead millions. He spent 40 years hidden away in Midian, in quiet work, far from Pharaoh's wrath, until the time was right. The delay protects the mission.
Okay, so protection. What's the second P?
The second P is purification. The hidden years are the crucible. It's where character gets refined. Obscurity tests your faithfulness. It cultivates humility by taking away the audience, and it strengthens your resilience through challenges and waiting.
And that purification process, it sounds like it's often built in the valleys. It can be painful.
It often is. Think about Joseph in Genesis. Years in slavery, in prison, hidden, painful, unjust. But those trials refined his wisdom and integrity. They were necessary to temper his youthful arrogance and prepare him to steward a nation.
Right.
Purification is what prevents that misalignment between influence and readiness. You can't be a steward of millions until you've been a faithful steward of silence and suffering.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Protection, purification. What's the third P?
The third is preparation. Simply put, Authority and influence are only entrusted when the preparation is complete. That holistic cultivation of wisdom, stature, and favor we talked about, God makes sure that the maturity is there before the responsibility is released.
So the delay isn't arbitrary, it's strategic. Function follows formation.
That's the core principle. The years David spent as a shepherd, they forged not just courage, but patience and strategic vigilance, all things he'd need for kingship. If he'd been made king right after being anointed as a boy, he wouldn't have had the depth to handle the politics, the military, everything he faced later. Preparation is the mandatory waiting period.
This whole deep dive is just such a powerful argument against rushing the process. But, reflecting on it isn't enough. We need actionable tools. So how do we, as professionals striving for impact, actually cultivate this hidden growth in our demanding, very visible modern lives?
We have to operationalize it. The first step is just to reiterate that principle.
Yeah.
Effectiveness flows from prior formation, not just from talent. Gifts without growth are fragile, so the investment has to be holistic. We have to be intentional about investing in our mind, wisdom, our body, stature, our spirit obedience, and our community favor.
And our sources give us a few specific practices to help us do that. Let's start with the first one, which they call the Hidden Faithfulness Inventory.
This is a really powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
It's basically listing your daily actions that are performed without recognition.
Like what?
Things like the diligent, boring cleanup work, silent service to a colleague, your personal spiritual disciplines, and then you consciously pray over them. The goal is to acknowledge God's role in shaping your character through those things.
You're turning your mundane checklist into a sacred inventory.
Exactly. It changes your internal metric of success. You stop grading yourself on applause and start grading yourself on fidelity.
I love that. Okay, the second tool is the Season of Obedience Journal.
Right, so this takes it a step beyond just listing. It's about reflection. You record the ways you see your character being shaped through those daily routines. You look for patterns of insight or growth or alignment. You're tracking internal, qualitative progress when the external metrics might be totally stagnant.
But what if someone tries this and just feels resentful? They're doing all these hidden things, but they feel bitter because no one notices. Does the journal help with that?
It absolutely does. The journaling process is designed to surface that resentment. It helps you see the difference between seeking validation from God and seeking it from other people. If your journal entries are just full of complaints about not being seen, you realize, okay, the purification process isn't over yet. It forces you to ask, am I doing this to be faithful or because I hope someone will finally notice me?
That's deep. That honest confrontation is the growth.
It is.
And the final practice you mentioned is intentionally performing unseen acts of service.
This moves it out of your head and into the world. You perform acts of kindness without any expectation of recognition, which actively reinforces humility. It ensures your character growth is rooted in being outward-focused, in empathy, not just inward self-improvement. It forces you to prioritize someone else's needs without the reward of a thank you. That's what builds durable integrity.
So when we pull this all together, what does it mean for us today? The silent years of Jesus, they were not a void. They weren't a gap in the timeline. They were the model. Obscurity is this powerful incubator for wisdom, for character, and for real influence. We have to recognize that faithfulness in obscurity is sacred preparation. It's the work that ensures that when visibility finally comes, the impact is durable, it's rooted in integrity, and it's capable of withstanding the pressure.
The world measures favor by applause, by recognition, accolades, by what you can put on a slide deck. But the enduring lesson here is that lasting favor, the genuine kind, it's measured by internal faithfulness. So if you commit today to treat every single unnoticed moment, every mundane task, every act of hidden obedience as essential training for a future you can't see yet, what lasting, unshakable contribution will you be ready to make 5 years from now?
That's the question to carry forward.